Hello, everybody. I am Mrs. Poppet, and this is my place. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I just love seeing you come for another story time with me. Today I have a very cute story, and I think that you'll really like it a lot. It's called What the Old Man Does Is Always Right. What the old man does is always right. I will tell you a story that was told to me when I was a little girl. Every time I thought of this story, it seemed to me more charming, for as it is with stories, it is with many people, they become better as they get older. I have no doubt that you've been in the country and seen a very old farmhouse with a thatched roof and mosses and small plants growing wild upon it. And there's a stork's nest on the ridge of the gable, for we cannot do without the stork. The walls of the house are sloping and the windows are low. Only one of the latter is meant to be opened. The baking oven sticks out of the wall like a great knob. An elder tree hangs over the palings, and beneath its branches at the foot of the paling is a cool pool of water, in which a few ducks are amusing themselves. There's also a yard dog, who barks at all corners. Just such a farmhouse as this stood in a country lane, and in it dwelt an old couple, a peasant and his wife. Small as their possessions were, they had one article they could not do without, and that was a horse, which contrived to live upon the grass which it found by the side of the high road when the old peasant wasn't riding him. The old peasant rode into town upon this horse, and his neighbors often borrowed him and paid for the loan as if rendering some service to the old couple. After a time they thought it would be well to sell the horse, or exchange it for something which might be more useful to them. But what might this something be? "You know best, old man," said the wife. "It's a fair day today, so ride into town and get rid of the horse for money or make a good exchange. Whichever you do will be right to me, so ride to the fair." As she fastened his neckerchief for him, for she could do this better than he could, and she could also tie it very prettily in a double bow. She also smoothed his hat around and around with the palm of her hand and gave him a kiss. Then he rode away upon the horse that was to be sold or bartered for something else. Yes, the old man knew what he was about. The sun shone with great heat, and not a cloud was to be seen in the sky. The road was very dusty, for a number of people, all going to the fair, were driving, riding, or walking upon it. There was no shelter anywhere from the hot sun. Among the rest, the man came trudging along, driving a cow to the fair. The cow was as beautiful a creature as any cow could be. "She gives good milk, I'm certain," said the peasant to himself. "That would be a very good exchange, the cow for the horse. Hello there, you with the cow," he said. "I'll tell you what, I dare say a horse is of more value than a cow, but I don't care about that. The cow will be more useful to me, so if you like, we'll exchange." "Sure will," said the man. Accordingly, the exchange was made, and the matter was settled. The peasant might have turned back, for he had done the business he came to do, but having made up his mind to go to the fair, he was determined to do so, if only to have a look at it, so he went on to town with his cow. Leading the animal, he strode on sturdily, and after a short time overtook a man who was driving a sheep. It was a good fat sheep, with fine fleece on its back. "I should like to have that fellow," said the peasant to himself. "There's plenty of grass for him by our palings, and in winter we could keep him in the room with us. Perhaps it would be more profitable to have the sheep than a cow. Shall I exchange?" The man with the sheep was quite ready, and the bargain was quickly made. Then our peasant continued on the way on the high road with his sheep. Soon after this he overtook another man who had come into the road from a field and was carrying a large goose under his arm. "What a heavy creature you have there," said the peasant. "It has plenty of feathers and plenty of fat. and would look well tied to a string or paddling in the water at our place. That would be very useful to my old woman. She could make all sorts of profits out of it. How often has she said, 'If we only had a goose.' Now here's an opportunity, and if possible I will get it for her. Shall we exchange? I will give you my sheep for your goose, and my thanks in the bargain." The other had not the least objection. Accordingly, the exchange was made, and our peasant became the possessor of the goose. By this time he had arrived very near the town. A crowd on the high road had been gradually increasing, and there was quite a rush of men and cattle. The cattle walked along the path and by the palings, and the turnpike gate they even walked into the toll-keeper's potato field, where one fowl was strutting about with a string tied to his leg, for fear it should take fright at the crowd, and run away and get lost. The tail feathers of the fowl were very short, and it winked with both eyes and looked very cunning as it said, "Cluck, cluck." What were the thoughts of the fowl as it said this I cannot tell you. But directly our good man saw it, he thought, "Why, that's the finest fowl I've ever seen in my life. It's finer than our parson's brood hen, upon my word. I should like to have that fowl. Fowls can always pick up a few grains that lie about, and almost keep to themselves. I think it would be a good exchange if I could get it for my goose. Shall we exchange?" he asked the toll-keeper. "Exchange," repeated the man. "Well, that would not be a bad thing." So they made the exchange. The toll-keeper at the turn-gate kept the goose, and the peasant carried off the fowl. Now he had done a great deal of business on his way to the fair, and he was hot and tired. He wanted something to eat and a glass of ale to refresh himself, so he turned his steps to an inn. He was just about to enter when an ostler came out, and they met at the door. The ostler was carrying a sack. "What have you got in that sack?" asked the peasant. "Rotten apples," answered the ostler, "a whole sack of them. They will do to feed the pigs with." "Why, that would be a terrible waste," he replied. "I should like to take them home to my old woman. Last year the old apple tree by the grass plot bore only one apple, and we kept it in the cupboard till it was quite withered and rotten. It was always property, my old woman said, and here she would see a great deal of property, a whole sackful. I should like to show them to her." "What'll you give me for the sack?" asked the ostler. "What will I give? Well, I'll give you my fowl in exchange." So he gave up the fowl and received the apples, which he carried into the inn's parlor. He leaned the sack carefully against the stove and then went to the table. But the stove was hot, and he had not thought of that. Many guests were present, horse dealers, cattle drovers, and 2 Englishmen. The Englishmen were so rich that their pockets quite bulged out and seemed ready to burst, and they could bet too, as you shall hear. Sss, sss. What could that be by the stove? The apples were beginning to roast. "What is that?" asked one of the Englishmen. "Why, you know," said our peasant. Then he told them the whole story of the horse which he exchanged for a cow, and then all the rest of it, right down to the apples. "Well, your old woman will give you well when you get home," said one of the Englishmen. "Won't there be a noise?" "What? Give me what?" said the peasant. "Why, she will kiss me and say, 'What the old man does is always right.'" "Let's lay wager on it," said the Englishman. "We'll wager you a ton of gold coin, 100 pounds to the 100th weight." "No, not a bushel. A bushel will be enough," replied the peasant. "I can only set a bushel of apples against it, and I'll throw myself and old woman into the bargain." And so the bet was made. "Done. Taken." Then the landlord's coach came to the door, and the 2 Englishmen and the peasant got in, and away they drove and soon arrived to stop at the old peasant's house. "Good evening, old woman," said the old man. "I've made the exchange." "Ah, well, you understand what you're about," said the woman. Then she embraced him and paid no attention to the strangers, not nor did she notice the sack. "I got a cow in exchange for the horse." "Thank heaven," she said. "Now we shall have plenty of milk and butter and cheese on the table. That was a capital exchange." "Yes, but I exchanged the cow for a sheep." "Ah, better still," cried the wife. "You always think of everything. We have just enough pasture for a sheep. You and milk and cheese and woolen jackets and stockings. The cow could not give us all these, and her hair only falls off. How you think of everything!" "But I changed away the sheep for a goose." "Then we shall have roast goose to eat this year. You dear old man, you are always thinking of something to please me. This is delightful. We can let the goose walk around with a string tied to her leg so she will be fatter before we roast her." "But I gave away the goose for a fowl." "A fowl! Well, that was a good exchange," replied the woman. The fowl will lay eggs and hatch them, and we shall have chickens, and we'll soon have a poultry yard. Oh, this is just what I was wishing for." "Yes, but I exchanged the fowl for a sack of shriveled apples." "What? I really must give you a kiss for that," exclaimed the wife. "My dear good husband, now I can tell you something. Do you know, just almost as soon as you left me this morning, I began to think what could I give you for a nice supper this evening, and then I thought of fried eggs and bacon with sweet herbs. I had eggs and bacon, but I wanted the herbs, so I went to the schoolmaster's. I know they have plenty of herbs, but the schoolmistress is very mean. Although she can smile so sweetly, I begged her to lend me a handful of herbs." "Lend!" she exclaimed. "I have nothing to lend. Nothing at all grows in our garden, not even a shriveled apple. But I could not even lend you a shriveled apple, my dear woman." "But now I can lend her 10, or a whole sackful, which I'm very glad of. It makes me laugh to think about it." And she gave him a hearty kiss.
"Well, I like all this," said both Englishmen. "Always going down the hill, and yet always merry. It's worth the money to see it."
So they paid 100 weight in gold to the peasant, who, whatever he did, was not scolded, but kissed. Yes, it always best when a wife sees and maintains that her husband knows best, and whatever is done is right. That is a story which I heard when I was a child, and now you have heard it too, and know that whatever the old man does is right. Isn't that just the cutest little story? This old man just keeps trading and trading and trading. He trades the horse for a cow, and the cow for the goose, and the sheep, and all these different animals. It's like he can't make up his mind what he wants. And then in the end, he ends up with a bag of shriveled up apples. But his wife is just thrilled with everything that he does. And that's how it should be when you love somebody. When you love your mother or your father or your husband or your wife or whoever, it's important to just always appreciate what they do and love them for it, because they're doing their best to make you feel better, happy, and comfortable. Always remember that. Anyway, I hope you liked today's story. It is such a cute one, and I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'll see you next time.